All right. So today, Alex and I are going to get a little bit scientific on you guys, all the listeners at home. One thing that we feel like is super important to focus on or just think about, kind of like have a conversation with yourself about, is your attention. And this episode is probably going to be called Attention Units because let me explain a little bit about what that is. So like attention units would be like a way to quantify the amount of attention you have to spend on activities throughout the day. So if you had like 10 attention units per day, that means you can only actually spend attention and effort on those 10 things per day. And you can't go to 12. It's a finite amount. So it's important to kind of think about where you're spending your attention and like assess maybe how much attention you have each day to be spending on the things you're doing. So we're gonna start with a little science and then get into kind of Alex and I's take on using your attention effectively and how we kind of reflect and understand how we're spending our own units of attention.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun episode because
I think it'd be interesting.
Like you were saying, maybe not everybody takes a second to kind of reflect on everything that they're doing on their day to day, and every single task takes up a little bit of their precious time. And I thought it was pretty interesting that you brought up the finiteness of the attention units and how you can only go to 10 within what would that be? Just a 24-hour period? Or
yeah, sure.
In a day
assign
itself?
It to a day.
Yeah, and especially from the perspective of when you are working a full-time position, and then you have to throw in that 8 hours a day or 6 hours if it's an early leave for a holiday weekend or something like that. But that just kind of really digs into those attention units.
Welcome to Project Rookie. I'm Jet.
And I'm Alex.
Whether you're in high school, college, or taking the first steps in a new career, we are here to uncover the promising tactics, genuine struggles, and inspiring victories that are supercharging the next generation of achievers. Thanks for tuning in.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official policies or positions of their respective employers. Individuals on this podcast are not licensed financial or investment advisors, and its contents should not be used as investment advice.
We're going to talk about an article/podcast by Dr. Gloria Mark. This is something that Jet actually found, so if you want to maybe go a little bit more into it.
So I was researching, Alex and I were talking about attention and wanting to do an episode on figuring out, our strategies for spending our attention effectively or efficiently. And so then I got into a rabbit hole and I was like, let me see the science behind this. Cause we know it's, it's there and your attention's limited, but what are the scientists saying? So this is Gloria Mark. She's a PhD, and I'm just going to cite that this is a podcast episode from Speaking of Psychology, episode number 225. Don't know if you need to go listen to it, but I'm going to give you some takeaways from it that we kind of like grounded this episode on. So number one is that there's like two types of attention, and this will matter a little bit later, but one is focused attention, where you're like engaged and challenged with whatever you're spending your attention on, whatever that activity is. And then there's like something they call rote activity, which is when you're engaged in something but not challenged at all. So that's like your TikTok scrolling, your TV, whatever is like, it's not hard for you to be paying attention to a TV show, but you're doing it anyway. So that's like what a rote activity is. And basically they talk about how the optimal state of attention is called flow. And that's when people are so immersed in something that time just stops mattering. So if you've ever been like super into some research project or into, that's probably not a good example, that you're and like have you wrapped in, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, it's 3 a.m. That's like, you are probably close to a state of flow. I wouldn't necessarily call it an efficient state of flow or an effective way of using your attention all the time, but you're probably in something like a state of flow. And that's really when it's focused attention, but it's like the perfect amount of challenge and the perfect amount of engagement that kind of just puts you in this state of flow where you forget about time. And that's probably like something you want to try and achieve with like tasks that are really important to you or you're really interested in. And if you're super interested, it probably occurs naturally. And I feel like it occurs naturally for me in some activities.
I think that kind of going back to that flow, something that came to mind for me, and it stemmed from video games. I play video games myself, so I know that I am kind of one of in the boat of the people who may kind of reach that state of flow while playing games. If after a little bit of playing and kind of the repetition of it all, the game just gets a little bit easy. But at the same time, with the variability of players, you continuously get that challenge and you can kind of get caught up in the day and lose track of time. And I think that can kind of be translated into really anything that people kind of take joy from, because, for instance, if you're watching a movie or if you are working on a side project and get caught up in that, it's a good and a bad thing, because you're putting so much of your, mental capacity towards it, and you're mastering this craft, but at the same time you may have a very important project finishing up at work, or you may have a important assignment to do. And while it seems like something that, I can work on for an hour and then pop back, with this kind of state of flow in mind, maybe it won't be the best idea to almost take that hour break of playing the game, because you may get into this state of flow and then reach one of those situations where, now I've been playing for 3 hours. I should have been working that other 2 hours that I didn't factor into this on something else. Now this deadline's coming up really quick and I don't have enough time to work on it. So I think, that was kind of what I got from that, was that flow can be a very good thing, but also a very bad thing at the same time, depending on what it is itself that you're doing to cause that state of flow.
Yeah, I think it depends on if the flow is happening for an activity that you want it to be happening for in extended periods of time. And I think it's a really good way to figure out maybe things that you really enjoy. Like, obviously video games, as the example, are designed for entertainment, so it's easy to enjoy. But if you start figuring out what activities kind of naturally drag you in or naturally put you in that state of like, okay, when I'm, diving into this type of book or doing this task, I just like completely forget about everything else going on. Those are probably things where you eventually, like, if that turned into your career or like the field you were in, you have a natural competitive advantage, because you naturally will just get so lost in like growth and learning and doing whatever it is that activity involves, that you'll beat out people that are just in that industry for a job, and like that's it. So it's like, if you start understanding what kind of gravitates you towards states of flow, those can be areas where you can be like probably super successful if you hone in your focus there and make sure that you're not getting into the state of flow for other tasks. But the other thing that this article talks about is like the finiteness. I don't even know if that's a word.
I think
the fact that attention is finite, which is obvious, but at the same time, not something that I think about as much as I should. And I think that especially in high school and college, I was not completely like honed in on what I was doing with my attention all the time. And so it brings up this interesting thing. It's like, attention is finite. So you only have a certain amount of attention to give throughout the day, but there's places where you can identify wasted attention that might not be like on a specific task. Like it's more obvious to say like, oh, I wasted an hour on TikTok or I wasted an hour scrolling, but it's less obvious to understand this concept of like switch costs, which is something that Gloria Mark brings up. And it's like, basically every time you switch between a task, the frequency of those switches increases, number one, the level of stress that you kind of just have throughout the day. And number two, the like, oh, I guess it is. Yeah, switch costs.
Yeah.
Switch costs is directly related to the amount of stress that you have throughout the day. So like the more you're switching between tasks, the more stress you have. And the reason is because each task you switch between, there's time that you have to spend reorienting yourself, even if it seems like, if you're not like stepping out of yourself and being like, okay, I did take time to reorient to that task. Like you take time to get back into even a state of like regular focus into between each task. So switch cost is something that you can focus on and reduce the amount of attention units, we'll call them, that are wasted. And so it's not just like things like, the point of this episode is not only like, oh, you shouldn't be spending all this time on video games or all this time on social media. It's more so like, can you be more efficient with your attention throughout your day? Like whether it's multitasking less or taking like longer, we'll talk about reasons, but like, there's just different things you can do to reduce the amount of attention you waste, because it's not always wasted attention when you're scrolling on social media and things like that. So that's kind of like one of the main ideas of today's show is like, maybe where can we be more efficient with our attention? How can we be more efficient with our attention? Not like, how can we take away social media or never do anything that's like not productive? That's not the point.
Yeah. I think that maybe one takeaway from that could be how there is somewhat of a correlation between attention and productivity, because when you give something your full attention, you are allowing yourself to put forth the most mental energy, the most physical energy, whatever that is, to actually get that task done. So if you are very very focused, you're in that state of flow on this task, you can expect more productive results from that in the future, because you actually are taking the time to do the task, to get the work done to XYZ. So if we want to look at it from that, the attention units can kind of also be, referred to almost as productivity units almost, or production units in a sense, because with that, the more time you are focusing on the task, the more attention you're giving it, the more then you can produce from that, the more that you can get from that in the future. So, I mean,
yeah,
it may just seem as if we're just we're just talking about how to be more focused and stuff. But if you look at it on a grander scale, these are kind of just everyday topics that kind of just get sprinkled in throughout your life, and really recognizing them and understanding them is how you set yourself apart from that other candidate, from that other person, because the more the more self-awareness you have, and I believe that was one of the things that was mentioned within the article, was kind of that, you have to recognize who you are and the things that do or do not work for you, or the things that kind of produce that extra bit of productivity or, reduce it. And so it's really kind of taking that step back and reflecting on, what can you do to be better, increase, your focus, your productivity. Efficient. Exactly. And so I think this is kind of interesting. And some of the, tips and stuff that we will share with you after this are kind of geared towards that. How can you maybe, free up some of that attention, make some more time for yourself within the day? So,
yeah, I think it's cool that you brought up that it's like productivity is almost like the unit that's like the quality of your attention increases productivity. It's like compounding. The more attention that you can provide without distraction to the task, the higher level of productivity you can like achieve or get out of that task.
Yeah.
Maybe is the right way to describe it.
Yeah. I mean,
but
that's perfect. It's kind of like you were saying, the compounding, similar to compounding interest. If the money's not there, then that money can't ever make more money for you. It can never be compounded. So if, that attention span is never there, you can't roll it over, go, and in the end have some sort of winnings to take home.
Yeah.
So,
and you'll see, like, Alex and I are not experts with our attention, or like a completely regimented day to day of exactly what we're spending attention on and all of those things. But little things like understanding and having a conversation with yourself about where your attention's going every once in a while will just help you be more efficient. And like, there's things that I do so that I can still afford to spend 30 minutes scrolling on social media, and I like try and be more efficient with my attention other parts of the day. So it's kind of like I wouldn't call it like, maybe it's like a cheat or a hack, but like figure out where areas you can be more efficient so that you can still have your fun time.
Yeah.
We'll call it that.
Did you mention breakpoint?
I did not.
Okay. So I think this is a perfect breakpoint to kind of trail off into some of the next topics that we're going to talk about. But breakpoint, it was mentioned by Dr. Marks, and it refers to when kind of in the switch cost sense too, that when you have multiple tasks going on throughout the day and you're trying to multitask them, you should find a natural break point within the work that you are doing. And what I mean, or what I should say, what Dr. Marks is, because I'm just relaying the information, what they are referring to by this is, if you're, and in the example in this was, if you're writing a paper, a natural break point would be at the end of a paragraph, at the end of a page, or, some sort of definitive marker where when you do pick this task back up, it's not going to take a lot of time to get yourself resituated. And that's kind of that switch cost.
Reducing that switch cost.
Exactly. And these topics and these ideas kind of all, flow interchangeably, where they don't necessarily rely on each other, but when one's, excelling, another one is usually going to benefit in the end as well. And so with that, these natural breakpoints are kind of just good because they allow you to then not have to, I still have to finish 2 more sentences, or I still have to file 3 more change orders when the next day, instead of getting that task done or stopping at a good point where you don't then have to continue stressing about it or continue thinking about how you will get it done in the future.
Totally.
And free up those attention units to then be put towards another task. And then, as we've been saying, to maybe produce better results or to get more done in your day. So
that's huge.
Yeah, they really are. I just think it, like how we were saying, the breakpoints just kind of help you move along a little bit better. And I'm going to let Jet.
I came back with it. So
awesome.
The gold that was just in what Alex said is that if you don't have a natural break point, number one, it's harder to come back. It takes more time. So if you have a natural break point, it reduces like the switch cost. So like when you switch back to that activity, you don't have to like reassess or re-dive into what you were doing as much if the break point was natural. But the other point that's super important is if you leave off on some kind of like open-ended thought or location of the activity, that you're still spending attention on that even when you're moving into the next task. And that's the wasted brain power we're trying to like really hone in on. Is like your attention can still be on the previous task while you're trying to get into whatever the next task you're doing is. I just wanted to like double down on that gold there.
No, definitely. And I'm glad you pointed that out. Because, like you were saying, it's really hard to juggle a million things at once. And then when you throw in the burden of, I'm 90% of the way there and I got to do something else, but I know how to fix it, but I have to get this other thing done, but I know how to fix it, but I have to get this thing done. And I think right there is a perfect example of what maybe some of the listeners at home may go through on a day to day. And I know I personally struggle with that sometimes when I have 5, 6 things, and maybe they're not all due within the same week. But however, going back on the attention units, you have only so many within a given day, within a given span of time. And so every passing moment is just losing one of those units. So
Yep.
there's the stress.
And then like your attention that you can actually give to the next task is not as high quality if you still have some of your attention on the last task. But anyways, like we said, breakpoint. So
Let's move
how,
on.
okay, we know that attention is limited. You're like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Well, the first thing that Alex and I think is good practice and like something that we do kind of to just assess what we're spending time on, I'm going to call it an attention audit. I don't know if this is a term that's like professionally used, but I think it's a good way of describing it. You basically like take a step back out of your kind of day and figure out where your attention is going. So like what in that day did you spend attention on, and where maybe what like tasks had, let's call it like attention creep from the previous tasks where you weren't that efficient. So probably like one easier way to figure out if you didn't spend as much attention on something as you should have was like, let's say when you were doing homework, how many times did you look at your phone? How many times? And then how long each time you looked at your phone did you sit on it? And then each time, so like that's 2 activities. You're doing homework and checking your phone. So each time you switch between those 2, there's switch costs involved. So you're losing not just the 5 minutes that you were on your phone. It's probably like 7 to 10 minutes because you got to like get back into whatever you were doing after you put your phone down. And then also like when you picked up your phone, you had to forget about whatever you're thinking about and then look at your phone. And it's kind of just creates this like cloudiness. And so taking a step back to kind of identify things like that throughout your day, that maybe that homework would have taken like 30 minutes, but it actually took an hour because you had 3 times checking your phone that seemed like 5 minutes, but really cost about 7 to 10 minutes of your attention.
Yeah. And then maybe throwing a bathroom break in between or grabbing water, and boom, there's that extra 30 minutes you have that you didn't actually need to spend on that assignment, or whatever the task may be. I'm still stuck in school mode. I can't wait to get out of here.
School mode is good.
But you brought up a good point, and I've actually done one of these attention audits for a class of mine. We had to look at our own technology usage and reflect on it. So we had to write a paper about it. But the way I found it very interesting because, and I did see some noticeable differences. So let me back up. We had to, I found the best way to do this was I used the screen time, or this, I think it's the screen time on my phone. I'm pretty sure Androids have that as well. I have an iPhone, in case anyone was wondering. And
blue texts.
So with that, I kind of just looked and I saw some of my bigger ones were, social medias, and obviously Snapchat that's a form of, messaging for me with some of my friends and stuff. So I obviously had a lot of time on there, but I kind of looked at where I could, really cut down that amount of time. And so the requirement was we had to track it, I think, over a week. It was to see what our screen time was in a week. And then after that, we had to kind of see if we could do a little bit of a reduction in the amount of time that we spent on that. And so after the week went by, I think I was averaging, 4.5 hours a day of screen time or something like that. And that was just like scattered throughout different things and such. But I found that my best way of reducing that was actually turning off the notifications. And with that,
we are so similar.
Yeah, so I actually up until probably only about a month ago, I turned a few of those applications back on. So what was that? That was a whole year and a half of no notifications, I think, up from the point that I did this kind of little study. And yeah, I think that's a, really great, and reflecting on kind of some of the things we've talked about, I can kind of see how, just turning those notifications off did have such an impact because of that switch cost that we were talking about. Because, and I'm not going to re-say the example, but going back to what Jet just said, you're constantly picking up your phone or, checking a text, there is a cost associated with just that, 1 minute, 2 minutes that and can then turn into 5, or, if you only think it's been 5 and it's really been 10, because then you got to get back into the swing of things. So I think it's really interesting, and it's a good thing that every once in a while kind of take that step back and see where you are spending your most time, and see what you can do about it, because you never know. I did see a noticeable increase in my grades and overall performance by turning off those notifications. So maybe some of those who are looking for a few extra points at the end of the year, if you still got time left, maybe try turning off the notifications, because you may free up yourself to be able to put more consistent and better quality of time into your work that you need to get done. So that was my little tangent on that.
3 things from that. Number 1 is like, the crazy part is that, or the cool thing about no notifications is that even like looking at your phone, not even touching your phone, but if you're seeing and hearing the notifications, those are like very tiny, but they add up. Like if your phone's constantly getting notifications during an hour of homework, you're probably losing attention, getting it back, losing attention, getting it back. And it's not even like, it's very rapid probably for a notification. It's not like as, intense as picking up your phone and sitting on it for 5 to 10 minutes. But like, I did the same thing when I was in college, and I was like, 8 to 5, my phone is not buzzing, because I will look at it if it buzzes. Like I will look, it's not even the banner notifications on my screen.
Yeah, I turn those off.
I always knew when it was 5 o'clock, because my phone would just blow up from all the notifications throughout the day.
That's so funny.
So like, one quick way, just to have like a example for like how to maybe do an attention audit, is I would say I've never done this, but I kind of feel like I can reflect and figure out which tasks are longer. But if you have trouble like figuring out where you might have been inefficient, setting a timer for like your tasks and thinking about like, you're like, okay, I think this homework's going to take me an hour. And then you can kind of watch like how long that homework actually took you, and then think about like, all right, how many distractions happened while I was doing that homework? That's why, I mean, I wasn't a library person. No judgment on library people, but like, I didn't like going there. I like to just zone in my room, but that's why the library exists. Like distractions minimize, focus on what you're doing. Like it's the whole concept of a library is like around making sure your attention can be focused on kind of the task at hand. But then there's another thing that's like, I think about these notifications as like little clouds in your brain, like every so often, little pings that kind of cloud. Maybe you don't even notice that it's clouding it, but it's probably clouding it in such a minuscule way. But if you think of like inventors, right? And this is going to be kind of an out there example, but if you think of somebody that invented something really great and you're like, how in the world did they think of that little detail? Okay. It's probably like the ability to think of those little details and invent something or do something like groundbreaking or innovative. If you have like constant cloudiness just in the background of your brain, you'll probably miss little details like that. So like, that's maybe if you're not motivated and you're like, I don't feel like, I feel like I'm fine with my attention. There's probably things that are clouding your attention that you're not even, thinking about. So I like to think about like the sharpest person that I know, like they probably have less cloud in their brain than like I do from letting my attention go in all these different places.
Yeah, I think kind of staying along that topic of the clouds in your mind, I think one of those can kind of be attributed to, um, and it was mentioned in the article a little bit, but there are some sort of ties between your attention span and the amount of sleep that you get on a day to day. Because
Yep.
For those who are more well rested, they typically have more mental capacity, more mental energy to kind of tackle those more work intensive tasks. Whereas those people who don't necessarily get enough sleep, enough of their daily nutrition and those along things along those nature, their bodies, kind of working at a deficit. And so with that, you kind of generally lean towards tasks that may be a little bit more, they may be less mentally exertive than solving your math problems. And instead, you would then, watch Netflix for a few hours or just kind of scroll on social media. And so that's kind of my shameless plug for it is important to kind of eat well and get your sleep in and things along that. And Jet's a big proponent of exercise and things
Oh yeah.
along that nature as well. And so you know in the hopes of kind of gaining more of those attention units back in that day-to-day span, focus on your sleep, focus on what you're putting into your body so that you can perform to your best, so that you know you can excel to the level that you want to. So you're no longer a rookie. Maybe you'll be the captain rookie at some point. Who
Yeah.
knows?
What's up, everyone? Jet and Alex here, and we just wanted to take a moment to say we started Project Rookie because we know that choosing a career or pursuing an entrepreneurial idea can be hard.
We hope that through this podcast, we can create exposure to opportunities, inspire your inner entrepreneur, and create a community for young and hungry achievers just like you. Make sure to follow our podcast on your favorite listening platform or on Instagram and X at Project X Rookie. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show. So
I think that you brought up a really good point with sleep, and I'm just going to drive this home again. It's like, we're not telling you this is how you need to be spending your attention. We're talking about ways that you can figure out where you're wasting your attention. And the definition of waste is like, what are your goals, and is your attention being spent getting to those goals? So your goals can be whatever you want them to be, but if you want to get to them faster, you probably have to sit back and like audit your attention. So like Alex said, sleep can affect your attention, emotions, your environment, all sorts of things going on around you can affect your attention. Like the example we had was your phone, but an attention audit will help you figure out what it is. Like maybe if you do all this reflecting, you're like, I have no idea what it is. Okay, now let's check my environment. Is my environment conducive of like the productivity I want? Okay, let's look at my sleep. Like you, by taking that step back and kind of assessing where your attention's being spent, it'll help you identify those areas. So like maybe it's sleep. Okay, I'm going to work on that. Or maybe it's my phone. Okay, I can turn off notifications. So like just taking the time to think about this stuff and identifying where you're wasting your own attention, and it's different for everyone, that is like will help you get to whatever goals you have, whether it's short term or long term. It's just one of those ways to kind of like focus in on where you want to be.
So with that, how do you budget this attention that we keep talking about? I mean, we're talking about how we can spend it, but how can we save it? Where do we kind of cut those corners to gain more of it back?
Yeah. So the first thing that I think that's a good question. I'm going to start it off with like a very high level, simple way of looking at things. You can say to yourself, like, what are the things that I say yes to, and what are the things that I say no to? And there's a lot of successful people that talk about what you say yes and no to. It's very I guess like well-known way of kind of figuring out how you're spending your time. But the point is, it's not just like when someone asks you to do something, you say yes or no. It's like when your phone buzzes and you pick it up, you're saying yes to your phone. That's like, I say yes to checking every notification on my phone. I say yes to watching TikTok for 30 minutes. I say yes to reading 30 minutes every night before bed. I say yes to making sure that I'm in bed by 9 p.m. because I know it takes me an hour to fall asleep and I need to fall asleep at 10 so I can wake up the next morning. Okay. That's what I say yes to.
Let it out there, Jeff.
That's the point. The point is like, what do I say yes to? What do I say no to? And if you want to save attention, you have to start saying no to the things that don't get you where you want to be, or are wasting attention that's like not productive for what you want to be spending your time doing. So that's like a high level, like, what do I say yes to? What do I say no to? I think that people think about that oftentimes as like, I said yes to going out, or, oh, I said yes to, like a friend asked me to do this task for them. But it's really like every activity you're, kind of engaging in is a choice. Sometimes it just feels like a forced choice, but everything is a yes or no. Like, I'm saying no to turning on my TV. I'm not going to list examples anymore. I almost went down it again. You got to stop me.
That was so funny. I don't know. Sometimes it's funny to watch it unfold. You're just in the flow of it all,
I was literally in a flow. How much time was that? 10 minutes?
No, I think it was like 3, but who's keeping count?
Right,
it doesn't matter. But, so you kind of mentioned, and I'm going to pick apart maybe some of the things you did talk about. So you mentioned
Go for it.
Saying yes to friends or saying yes to going out. And so this is kind of where the attention audit may be, where it be proven beneficial, because if you kind of have something you can look at and say, oh, I'm putting this much time towards this and this much time towards that. You can kind of see, similar to a company spreadsheet on their year-end budget, you can kind of see where you're bleeding out at the seams, or where you're losing the most attention, or kind of giving up the most. But I think it's really difficult to kind of, say yes to one and no to the other. But, that I had a very good point with this. You kind of need to be growing and evolving on like what is exactly beneficial or not beneficial to you. And it is kind of all geared towards how you were saying, what is truly most important at the time? Is it going to make $1 million, or is it going to have fun for an hour at night, and then have to wake up and be miserable the next day because you still have to go to work? So
and then it's still be spending attention on last night in the morning.
Exactly. So, it is kind of a give and take. One day it may be all right to say, all right, I'm going to go waste a few of my attention units and have, a crazy night and that I won't remember, or something like that, blah, blah, blah. But then, next week you might have to sacrifice that. And that's all right. It's a balance within it all. We're not going to say, you have to stay in and do nothing all the time because you need to put 100% of your attention towards working and all of that. But it does come to a point where, that self-reliance, you have to be able to recognize when the situation and the time has changed, and when you do really need to buckle down and kind of say, all right, I can't waste time doing this. Like, I'm sorry, no offense. Like, I'd love to do it, but it's just not in the cards right now. And it's a good skill to have, and it's a necessary skill to have, to be able to say yes, but at the same time to be able to say no, and to know that at the end of it, it's all right, because it's more beneficial to you. You're going to be happier in the long run rather than dwelling on it continuously.
Yeah. You just gave me a really good point. So like, now my question is, okay, well, when something happens, like friends are going to do something and you want to, I'm not saying never go out with your friends, but like, if you've made the decision, I want to stay in on this Saturday, or I want to be productive this Saturday, what can you say to your friends when they ask? And so like with that question, something that I've found works really well, and kind of like no follow-up questions happen after. If you're like, I'm working on something that's really important to me, or I really care about this thing and I'm staying in. They're like, oh, you shouldn't care about that. They're not gonna, your friends aren't gonna be like, oh, you shouldn't care about that.
Yes.
Like usually if you say like, I really care about this, or like, this is really important to me, I gotta stay in, it's pretty, relaxed, especially if you have competent friends. That was
Yeah. That was a little shot there, Jet. You got some incompetent friends there.
Let's say like able-minded friends.
Okay, that's better.
Aware.
I think you brought up a good point. And I'm sure that a few of the listeners at home may have struggled with this, or may currently be struggling with it, depending on where they're at in life. I don't really think that ever stops. You're always gonna kind of reach that situation where you're juggling do I go out? Do I pick up the extra shift at work? Do I go out, or do I work on this, or something like that? And it really does go down to what, as a person, you feel is most important to you, and where you want to be, and whether or not that will help you get to where you want to be in life. And you were kind of bringing this up when you were talking earlier. This kind of came to mind. The saying, one I'll generalize it, one person's trash is another person's treasure. And you can kind of look at that trash as kind of what you may see people consistently posting on social medias and stuff, that almost that FOMO, that fear of missing out, when you see people having fun at a club or at a sporting event or XYZ, just hanging out with people. But to some, they may be in that situation looking at what you're doing and be envious of you. So it's kind of just, I don't know, situational based, I guess, and it all kind of depends on the person. But
exactly,
you shouldn't be afraid to tell those around you, and this kind of goes along the lines of surrounding yourself with the people that will help you and elevate you up. And if you can't tell your friends that you're happy to be staying in and working on something that genuinely you're proud of and you're doing, well, I don't know. I don't necessarily think they'd be the best of friends towards me, or I would want to be the best of friends with them. But as long as you really kind of explain the situation and just be honest, I think honesty is really the main point of this all. Just be honest with people, because if you tell everyone the situation and kind of elaborate and lay it out, how can they really question your decision when you've laid it out clearly in front of them?
So like something for me that's really important that we've been talking about, like I tend to get energy from big groups of people. So like going out with a big group of friends and having a fun night is something important to me. Like I enjoy doing that, and it's like a reset. I get to like have fun and kind of not think about anything else besides like that moment with those friends. But if that's something that's important to you, first of all, figure out what your limit is. And you can get specific with this like attention budget, right? You can say, or what you say yes or no to. Like I say, I'm going out on Friday and Saturday night, but on Friday, I cannot think about going out until 8 or 9, because we've all had times, maybe we haven't, but I used to remember when on Friday, I'd be like doing homework from like 5 or 6, 7, maybe 4 o'clock, whatever time, like earlier in the day. And I'd be getting texts about plans. And like, so I'm doing homework, making plans, And then like all of a sudden I've been spending 50% of my attention on the plans that are going to start later. Mm-hmm. And so like I said, okay, I'm going to say no to talking about going out until 8 or 9. And then, after like, that's my break point. Then I'm going to go like figure out what's happening and go out and have fun and get back in a reasonable time. But like, you can get very specific. Like I'm only going to go out once every third weekend, and I went out every weekend in school. So like, I'm not preaching. I'm not like telling you how to act or anything like that. But I would try and be like really intentional of the exact time, like, okay, my brain's not going to think about going out. I'm not wasting attention on that until like we're going out. And then, you know, you can think about like if there's something to do on Saturday at 3 p.m., you can think to yourself, like, and even if you do go do something at 3 p.m. that's kind of like counterproductive, like ask yourself, like, should I be doing this at 3 p.m.? Does it really matter if I start at 3 or wait till 5 or wait till 7? Like, just talk about that with yourself. Be a weirdo, have a conversation with yourself. Be like, okay, I'm saying yes to going out at 3 right now. Like, that's fine. You can do that once in a while, but have those conversations with yourself, because just being aware of that instead of like blindly kind of like, yeah, I'm just going with the flow all the time, that's how you waste your attention. So just that simple awareness will save you attention over the long term. But
yeah. I think off the end of that, it kind of reminded me of another thing that was brought up, and how there isn't so much of a definitive work/life separation or balance within the day-to-day. That's kind of with the rise of the connectivity that we kind of have. So
yeah, especially in school.
Yeah, definitely. And with the pandemic only being a few years back and such, and Zoom University and all those other Microsoft Teams we, you know, kind of got accustomed to not almost having a break where, you know, you're constantly getting notifications for this class or that class, and you may even be sitting in class and you may get a new assignment posted, and then you start worrying about
from
that.
Another class.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it really is difficult to kind of manage all these things going on a day-to-day. And I think what you brought up at the end was pretty important, because you do need to find that break point almost where you can stop thinking about what you're doing at work and go enjoy the night or go do something else, and just give yourself a little more mental stimulation than just sitting behind the desk and working away and typing at your computer. And at times you do have to make the sacrifices to get what you want, but at others, enjoy it. There's no point in working so hard if you can never have the time to celebrate the fruits of your labor. So
yeah,
find that balance in your day to day. It's important to be able to say no to the guy at work trying to email you at 9 o'clock because he wants to work later on. You know, you don't have to also do that as well.
Yeah. Yep. You can. And I think that another like tiny little thing is there's so many things, especially in college, where you have the opportunity, like it starts at 3. It's like this activity. We'll call it maybe an activity that involves drinking or games or something that's not school related. Yeah. And there is a lot of activities that if the start time's 3, you can probably show up an hour later and have the same exact amount of fun that you would have if you got there at 3. So just like, so
maybe
taking
more
sometimes like that question and being like, can I do something for the next hour that's going to make me feel like really good and just get my mind off of school? Like, is there something that's bothering me that I need to get done and I can just leave that attention, you know, at home or in school, and then I can go really enjoy this activity? Like that's probably another huge area where you can like look for wasted attention. But I'm wondering, Alex, is there a way to have more than, like, if we use the example, you have 10 attention units in a day max. Is there a way to have more than 10?
Let me think about this one for a sec. Physically, no. But one way to kind of solve that problem would be to kind of pass off some of those tasks and maybe find a way or a source other than just your own work to get that done. And by that, I kind of mean outsourcing it to maybe another service or platform or person to get that same exact task done, but at the same time free yourself up. And I mean, that's no different than getting your meal delivered rather than going to pick it up. If you have
exactly
something due at 5 o'clock and you need to eat just along that time too, then maybe it would be more beneficial to outsource that and get delivery for the night, because then you don't have to worry about cleaning, cooking, any of those things. Or
Yep.
to maybe kind of go back on this, if you have a whole month's worth of tasks or things already scheduled on your plate, and maybe it would be a good idea to have somebody else go through and put those on your calendar, or to go onto your phone and automatically set up all the reminders or things along those lines, because that may itself take an hour or 2 hours or three, depending on how well versed you are in that software, those platforms. Or it may have a completely new learning curve in itself if you're trying some new sort of system to manage all these for the first time. So if you kind of utilize somebody else's skills and recognize things that you may not be good at, and really see if there is a benefit in you learning it or not, it may be more beneficial to then find somebody else to do that work for you.
Yeah. So exactly. So the concept of outsourcing is a little bit confusing. I think at first you're like, okay, I'm just going to pass on tasks or thinking onto somebody else, or onto it's probably a lot easier to think about if you're like, okay, this AI software can optimize my calendar for me, so I don't have to spend time organizing and planning my calendar. So like from a non like human perspective, if you have something virtual like a software or an AI program that is like optimizing things in your life, like tasks like that, it's probably easier to grasp. But there's also the human concept, the like human part of outsourcing. Most people don't cut their own hair. They outsource a haircut to somebody that cuts hair all day, and they do it really fast, and you pay for that. So most of the time you're like, I could spend all this time trying to figure out how to cut my own hair, buy the equipment, and then it'll take me like an hour to do my hair. Or I can go to a barber shop, pay somebody $30 or whatever you pay for your hair, and that's like worth it. So you're basically like buying time back by outsourcing something like a haircut. So it's not like get a personal chef, get like a personal assistant to follow you around all day.
Well,
There's things that we outsource all the time. And so like one thing, I'm going to roll Owen's ad here, I think, but one thing that I outsource, I felt like I was spending a lot of time thinking about the gym, thinking about my meal prep, thinking about my workout plan, and like thinking about my progress. Planning all that out and like taking time to reflect on it was taking up a lot of my time. And I was getting like, let's say, dissuaded from actually like putting energy into the gym. And so something that I decided was worth my time, and this is not saying like you need a fitness coach, but like you can start outsourcing things if you think you want to spend time on XYZ activity, but you're really having to spend it on ABC activity right now. You can think about outsourcing that. So like I have a fitness coach and plans my grocery list, plans my workouts, and checks in with me for 30 minutes every Sunday to like understand where I'm at, and like if I'm losing weight at that time or if I'm gaining weight, like whatever my goal is, I say, hey Owen, I want to lose, like I want to be shredded by summer, like figure out how to get me there. He does all of it. And like obviously I pay him for that, but that's something that's worth my time, because then all I have to do, show up at the grocery store, open my phone, and like go pick out those things. That's like way less mental energy for me than like sitting there and figuring out what I'm going to get and planning out my meals for the week. Same thing. I need to get myself to the gym. Once I'm there, look at my phone. Owen has a plan for me. I'm going to work out. And so like that's an area, like a good example for me of like where I outsource something. And I'm like eventually in my career, I'm probably going to do more things like that, like trying to figure out how AI or different software can like automate my calendar, or like automate different tasks for me so I can spend less attention there. But the whole point is like, if it's worth it to you, outsourcing things like that is an option. If you're like, I really need to spend attention on this business idea. So like I have a personal business idea that I'm like, I want to spend a lot of energy and effort and like attention on this when I have the extra attention. And I was like, in order to do that, I need to get rid of like a few different things that are taking up my attention during the day. So point is, there's like a way to kind of expand the amount of attention. It's actually just like deleting things off your attention plate and adding things in the same spot. But you're basically expanding the amount of things you can do by outsourcing certain things.
Yeah.
I said a lot there.
I think this is one thing that as we, the collective, progress as professionals and in our day-to-days, we will probably see more benefit towards kind of paying for some of those services that do take that heavy lifting off. I think for right now it may seem a little far-fetched, but as the times go, you may find yourself in a position where you could have an assistant, where you could have a personal trainer that does all of these things for you. But it is really beneficial when you no longer have to take that 3 hours at the beginning of your week or that extra hour out of your day to do a task, when something else or someone else can do it for you. And especially if it's 10 tasks that can be automated or something like that, that just frees up basically your whole day, and you can accomplish 2 days worth of work within one whole attention unit span of time, I guess we could say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I think you said kind of a lot of what there is with the outsourcing.
Yeah. Like a really good point though, because it like, especially for like, if you're a high school or a college student right now, you're probably like, that sounds a little bit crazy. Like I'm in my job out of school. I have like a comfortable salary. I can make decisions like that. But I think where it's like really applicable if you're in high school or college is like, you're going to have to start learning about AI and software and just like what's out there, not like understanding how to code, but just understanding the tools that are available. Like there's a reason you use a calculator instead of long division on paper. So just being aware and interested, kind of curious about different systems out there or like free ways to optimize kind of tasks in your life. That's probably where it's like most applicable to you. And it's like, a good example is the free version of ChatGPT. Like when that came out, I wasn't using it to do my homework. But if I was like writing an essay and I'm like, hey, I have these 3 main ideas, I don't know a fourth. Like, can you help me think about a fourth? And then it'd be like, here's 5 options for a 4th main idea for your topic. Like that, just like, it's not writing your paper. You want to learn. So do your homework and do your tasks because you want to learn those things. You're paying to go to school, or even if you're in high school, like not learning those things is going to hurt you. So like, but to kind of like stimulate those little moments or just be able to use a tool like that to like get you unstuck when you're in a stuck spot. Like maybe I would have spent 20 minutes thinking about the 4th main idea for that paper, but like I just figured it out in 30 seconds with an AI tool. So that's probably where it makes more sense for someone in high school or college to kind of think about this outsourcing concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely can be applied to anything that makes it easier to do a task or kind of get the result that you want without having to overburden yourself mentally or physically to get it done. I think that was a great way to kind of take it away from how we were just saying with the assistants and all those little bit more higher level ways of outsourcing, and even just in a production sense. We don't even have to talk about that. But I think, sorry.
Any last words?
I was just going to say, for those wondering, Owen's episode is episode 9, actually. If you want to go back and listen to it, there's also a little commercial in there that kind of breaks down a little bit of some of the services and such that he offers. So if you're a little bit more interested in that, episode 9, small wins,
big results.
Yes, that was it. I was like, it was big something. I knew.
Oh my God.
So
That's so funny. Should we talk about multitasking for a little bit? Just sneak it in at the end.
yeah, I think yeah. So another way of kind of we have identified as a maybe a I don't know, would you say a stressor on the attention units? Would you say?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at
Yeah.
it. Definitely one is a stressor.
It's a
yeah.
benefit and a disadvantage at the same time. Would
Yep.
kind of be multitasking and whether that be working on two things simultaneously or trying to get 5 things done throughout the day. They can kind of be as equally challenging to manage and kind of juggle throughout the day. And if we kind of look at it from a sense of some of the things that we talked about earlier within the article, there is the switch cost, finding the right break point within that. And so as you are going from one thing to another and then back to another and checking this and having a thought on, oh, this is how I solve this problem, and then you jump all the way from number 5 back to number 1, that can be very stressful. And I'm sure that the listeners probably thought that little explanation was a little stressful too. So can you imagine what's going on in your head or in our heads when we, all have 5, 6, 20 things, whether it takes a minute to an hour, there's a lot of things going on and a lot to juggle. So,
Yep.
multitasking, it's a good and a bad thing at the same time. For some it works, but for others it may not be the best way to kind of get those things done in an efficient manner.
Yep.
And it is kind of important to be able to, and this has kind of been a reoccurring theme throughout this, is kind of that self-awareness and kind of being able to recognize the situation that you are in and kind of how well you can perform with those sort of constraints or the things that you do actually have access to.
I'm going to sneak in something because you brought up a good point. Like if you're thinking of like 6 to, you're like, oh, I got 6 to 20 things on my mind. One thing that I'll do to like, if I think of something and it pops in my head, like an idea, it's really mostly ideas or like, oh, I just remembered I have to do this later. I write that down and it just zip out of my brain. Like I'll write it down somewhere. So like having something to always write something down is like a good idea. But I have like this note in my phone that's like it's like a junk drawer. It's like every random thought or like idea or like thing I need to get done.
Anything.
And anything goes in that note. Like anything goes in that note. Oh, someone told me to listen to this podcast. Like
in the note.
I just put it in there and every 2 or 3 days I check that list, but like it allows me to like write it down and get it out of my head. Like no attention spent on that right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like just a quick tip. And the fact that you have one is really funny because I think that maybe it must work, right? It must be a good way of.
I personally, with the way that my brain works and such, I find more benefit in being able to kind of just have a dump, I call it, like just a central spot where I can, put everything that I need almost. I don't like mix it with, like you were saying, it's mostly ideas or like if I have someone suggests it or if someone, tells me someone's name that I got to go look back up on LinkedIn or because I don't, for whatever reason, I don't have service. I don't know, whatever. I can't do it in that moment. I'm in the car, blah, blah, blah. It's a good thing just to kind of have and definitely don't let it get lost in the junk drawer. I like to think of it as.
You got to go back to that note.
Yeah.
Like if you don't go back to that note, you're going to miss things and forget about them. Cause like if you get good at writing them down, you will take them right out of your head in that moment. So like you have to go back and when you have that time to spend attention on that list. And like, I throw everything in there, but then like when I look at it, I'm like, this goes in like the books I need to read, or like this goes in like my podcast list. Like it gets organized every once in a while, but like it is the spot for anything that pops in my head and needs to get right back out.
I am looking at I actually have another one that's on my whiteboard right now, and it has all the project. It has all the Project Rookie stuff on it. So
I think
it's fine. That's another thing. I think it's really important to kind of like take some time and buy some of these tools or kind of familiarize yourself with some of the tools that are out there to be able to keep track of these ideas, to plan efficiently, to plan it accordingly. It's not a bad thing to be prepared or to know about other things, or to get, to ask people, oh, how did you do that? Because I'm like, that seems really fast, or that's really efficient. Like, how did you do that? Like, is that a special app? Whatever. Like, it's not pestering. If it may be beneficial to you, you should ask and find out what that tool, what that service is.
Yeah, like, how are they optimizing? And anyone you meet, like, everyone has little ways of optimizing things, like, especially, and I actually like am very fond of like notoriously lazy people, because they always find really good ways to like optimize things, because they are so motivated to put the least amount of effort in like a lot of things they do. And there's an art to that. And like, even, like, I think it's Steve Jobs or Bill Gates says he loves studying naturally lazy people, because they actually like can figure out the fastest and easiest way to do something, because just like things that are like, they'd rather be doing something else. They figure out like the most efficient path to do something. And maybe it's not always high quality, but like, if you're trying to optimize things, just figure out, like, if I could take this off my mind and it was done 80% as well, is that worth it to me? Or if it's done 70% as well, is that worth it to me? Like, if it can't like fully replace a task, but you're like, yeah, I don't need to put 100% effort into that anyways, so like, I'm down to let AI do this or whatever. All right, and that's the pod. If you enjoyed the show, it'd mean the world for you to leave us a review and share it with your friends. Make sure to follow our podcast on your favorite listening platform. And if you're joining us on YouTube, definitely hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes. Also, check us out on social media. We're at Project X Rookie on both Instagram and X. We'd love to chat with you in the comments or in our DMs. Thank you for listening, and as always, I hope we're helping you take control of what's next. Catch you next time.